There's a way to run Ubuntu, Arch, Debian, Fedora, basically every Linux distribution, all on the same system at the same time. That's Bedrock Linux. And if you've ever felt trapped choosing one distro and missing features from another, this is about to change how you think about Linux entirely. Every Linux user faces the frustration that distributions are all or nothing. Pick Ubuntu, you're committed to Ubuntu's package manager, Ubuntu's release cycle, and Ubuntu's philosophy. Want Arch's rolling releases where you get the latest software weekly? That's a complete reinstall. Want Fedora's cutting-edge toolchain? Another full migration? You can't just grab the parts you like. You can't mix stability with innovation on the same machine. It's like being told to choose between a rock-solid foundation and a rocket ship, but you can't have both. This forced choice has been Linux's dirty secret for decades, and it's what Bedrock Linux was designed to eliminate. Bedrock Linux is a meta distribution. It doesn't create its own packages. Instead, it acts as an orchestration layer that lets you combine components from other distributions and makes them function as a unified system. Bedrock calls each distribution installation a stratum. Think of Strata as separate distribution instances, each with its own package manager, repositories, and packages, but all coordinated by Bedrock's integration layer underneath. So practically, you could have an Arch stratum for cutting-edge packages, a Debian stratum for stability, and a Fedora stratum for specific tools your team needs. They don't conflict. They don't fight for resources. They coexist transparently. The magic happens through what Bedrock calls overlaying, a file system technique that layers these distributions together. When you run a command, Bedrock knows which stratum it belongs to. When you need a library, Bedrock finds it across all strata. When conflicts arise, like two distributions expecting different versions of the same library at the same path, Bedrock resolves them invisibly. Imagine you want to use a PDF converter from one distro, but need a specific library from another. On a normal system, this creates dependency hell. On Bedrock, you install both, and they just work. Your application menu automatically shows programs from every stratum. Shell auto-completion works across distributions. Fonts installed in one stratum are available to applications in another. It's like Bedrock is constantly translating between different Linux dialects, making sure they understand each other perfectly. The installation process is surprisingly elegant. You start by installing any Linux distribution you want, Ubuntu, Arch, whatever you prefer. Then you run Bedrock's installer script with a hijack flag. This transforms your existing installation into a Bedrock system, converting your original distro into the first stratum. Once that's done, you use a command called brlfetch to pull in additional distributions. Want to add Arch? One command, sudo brlfetcharch. Bedrock handles downloading the distribution files, setting them up as a new stratum, and integrating them with your existing system. From that point forward, your workflow changes completely. You can run sudo pacman smupdf from Arch to install a PDF viewer, then sudo apt install textlib from Debian to install LaTeX, then pdflatexfile.txt and mupdf file.pdf using tools from different distros, all in one command sequence. The package managers work natively. The tools understand each other, no containerization overhead, no virtual machines, just native Linux working across distribution boundaries. The technical implementation uses something called cross-file system, a middleware that sits between the strata. It handles path resolution, library loading, and dependency resolution across distributions. There's also union mounting, which layers file systems so everything appears as a single unified hierarchy, even though it's coming from multiple sources. Behind the scenes, Bedrock maintains a configuration for each stratum. You can specify which init system to use, which package manager takes priority for certain tools, and how to resolve conflicts. But for most workflows, it just works out of the box. Bedrock isn't for everyone. It's not a replacement for Ubuntu for casual users. It demands Linux competency, but there's a specific group of people for whom Bedrock solves real, frustrating problems. Developers absolutely love it. You might need the latest frameworks and tools from rolling release distros like Arch, but you also need rock-solid stability for your database and production servers. Bedrock removes that forced choice. One developer reported running Debian for stability, Arch for development tools, and Gentoo for source-based compilation on the same system. That's impossible on traditional Linux. System administrators benefit enormously. Imagine you're maintaining servers that need 95% Debian for standardization, but one critical application only works properly with an Arch package. Instead of maintaining two separate machines or dealing with containers, you run Bedrock. You get the consistency you need with the flexibility you require. Tech enthusiasts and power users appreciate Bedrock because it's the ultimate have-everything system. You want Debian's apt, Ubuntu's community support, Arch's AUR for source builds, and Fedora's latest toolchain? On Bedrock, you actually have them all simultaneously on one laptop. The performance overhead is minimal for realistic workflows. There is some runtime overhead in configuration file access and cross-stratum communication. But unless you're doing something extreme, like accessing /etc hundreds of times per second, you won't notice any slowdown. Bedrock isn't magic. It has real constraints you need to understand before attempting installation. First, compatibility. Some distributions or package combinations don't play nice together. Bedrock has known compatibility issues and likely some unknown ones. The official recommendation is to test your specific workflow in a virtual machine before deploying to production systems. Second, security. A Bedrock system is only as secure as its weakest stratum. You're pulling packages from multiple distributions. If you combine secure, hardened distros like Debian and CentOS, your security is solid. If you add unstable or less maintained distributions, your security degrades accordingly. You're explicitly choosing your attack surface. Third, expertise required. Bedrock demands real Linux knowledge. You need to understand package managers, CRUT, partitioning, and system administration. This isn't something you install and ignore. You're actively managing multiple distributions within one system, making decisions about which stratum provides which tools. That said, Bedrock has a remarkable stability record. Since its first public release in 2012, there's been exactly one bug that caused a Bedrock component to crash, and exactly one that caused data loss. Over a decade of development with that track record is genuinely impressive for a project this complex. Once a Bedrock system is running well, it keeps running well. So, is Windows finally over? No. Windows maintains approximately 71% of the global desktop operating system market. Windows is not going anywhere. Bedrock Linux is not going to dethrone Windows. This isn't a story about Microsoft's collapse or some miraculous Linux takeover. That's not what's happening here. But something is fundamentally shifting in the computing landscape, and it matters. Linux desktop adoption has accelerated at an exponential rate, and the numbers tell a fascinating story about market momentum. It took 8 years for Linux to grow from 1% to 2% market share. Then, it took another decade to reach 3%. But the jump from 3% to 4% happened in just 0.7 years. From 4% to 5% took only months. The United States crossed 5% desktop market share in June 2025 for the first time ever. That's the first time Linux hit this threshold in North America, one of Microsoft's traditional strongholds. This acceleration pattern is significant because it suggests we're past the tipping point of skepticism. Linux went from the hobby of enthusiasts to something that mainstream users actually consider. That didn't happen by accident. Why the acceleration? Several catalysts converge simultaneously, and understanding them shows why Bedrock's timing is so relevant. Windows 10 support ended in October 2025, forcing millions of legacy system users to make a choice: invest in expensive Windows 11 upgrades or explore alternatives. Windows 11's hardware requirements are steep. It demands newer processors, TPM chips, and specific security features. Many machines simply can't run it. Beyond hardware, Windows 11's mandatory cloud integration, AI feature requirements, and telemetry raise serious privacy concerns among power users and developers. These aren't casual complaints, they're deal breakers for people who value data control. Simultaneously, the gaming barrier fell. Valve's Proton technology made gaming on Linux viable, not as a workaround, but as a genuine alternative. The Steam Deck proved that Linux could deliver a premium gaming experience out of the box. Suddenly, gamers, Microsoft's most loyal constituency, had zero reason to stick with Windows for entertainment. That single shift was seismic, because gamers represent huge market purchasing power. Institutional migration tells the story too. Germany's Schleswig-Holstein completely replaced Microsoft tools with Linux in public offices in April 2024. That's not a small decision. It's an entire regional government betting its IT infrastructure on open source software. France operates over 103,000 government computers on a custom Ubuntu distribution. These aren't isolated experiments. They're strategic decisions by large organizations that Linux is mature enough for critical systems. When governments move, enterprise follows. When an enterprise adopts it, the barrier to consumer adoption drops significantly. Here's where Bedrock becomes strategically important. Linux historically suffered from a fatal flaw: choice paralysis. Too many distributions, each with different philosophies, different package managers, different ecosystems, different workflows. A developer would love Arch's bleeding-edge packages, but need Debian's stability for production. A sysadmin would want Ubuntu's community, but Fedora's security posture. Users felt genuinely trapped by forced compromises. Bedrock eliminates that dilemma entirely. It says, you don't have to choose, you can have everything. For users transitioning from Windows, Bedrock represents what Linux growth actually means. It's not about Linux taking over. It's about Linux becoming a mature, flexible platform where you assemble exactly the system you need from the best available components. That's the future these adoption numbers point toward. Is this going to make Linux the dominant OS tomorrow? Absolutely not. Windows will maintain dominance for years, probably decades. Enterprise infrastructure takes decades to migrate, and Microsoft's ecosystem lock-in is real. But Bedrock is a symptom of where the market is fundamentally heading, toward flexibility over monopoly, toward open ecosystems over closed platforms, toward user choice over corporate control. The trajectory is clear, even if the endpoint is years away. The practical question now is Bedrock right for you? If you're a casual user who recently switched from Windows, the answer is no. Grab Ubuntu, Linux Mint, or Fedora Workstation instead. Learn one distribution first. Get comfortable with the basics. Bedrock will still be there if you need it later. If you're a Linux user frustrated by forced trade-offs, wanting both stability and cutting-edge tools, or needing components from multiple distributions, then yes, absolutely test Bedrock. Your minimum requirements are straightforward: a working Linux environment, basic familiarity with CRUT and partitioning, and internet access. If you're a developer managing multiple tool chains, or a system administrator tired of maintaining separate machines for different purposes, Bedrock directly solves your problem. The learning curve is moderate if you're already Linux competent. Download the installer, set up a virtual machine, install a base distribution, hijack it with Bedrock, fetch one or two additional distributions, test your actual workflow. If it works smoothly in the VM, you can confidently deploy to your real system. Bedrock Linux is actively maintained. Version 0.7.31 was released in January 2026, with regular updates and an engaged community. This isn't an abandoned project. It's getting actively developed after 15 plus years of continuous improvement. The decision ultimately comes down to this: do you want maximum system flexibility, and are you willing to manage that complexity? If yes, Bedrock is worth your time. If you want simplicity, stick with a traditional distribution. Bedrock Linux represents a fundamental shift in how we think about operating systems. It's not about picking a single distribution and accepting its limitations. It's about assembling your perfect system from the best available components. That's not Windows is finally over. That's Linux growing up. It's becoming a sophisticated platform for people who want control, flexibility, and the best tools regardless of where they come from. If you've ever felt constrained by operating system choices, if you want the best tools from multiple worlds, or if you're just curious about cutting-edge Linux, Bedrock is absolutely worth exploring.